While darts is a game of precision and mental toughness, some players have found ways to bend the rules for some very questionable wins. From suspicious tactics at the Oki to full-blown match-fixing scandals, these cheaters left fans outraged and careers in ruins. Starting with this player, Justin Pipe wasn't supposed to be the story of the 2017 World Darts Championship, but when his opponent, Bernie Smith, lined up for a match-winning dart, Pipe did something that would follow him for the rest of his career. He coughed. Not a casual, unavoidable tickle, a deliberate, well-timed disruption, just as Smith was about to throw. Smith missed, Pipe won. And in another era, that might have been the end of it, but Sky Sports had cameras, slow-motion replays, and a broadcast team that wasn't about to let it slide. Wayne Mardle called it despicable, and within days, the Darts Regulatory Authority handed Pipe a £3,000 fine.
That's right. What he didn't do, what he did not do, that any dart player would have done apart from Justin Pipe. I've got a cough, I turn away. I guarantee I turn away. He made no effort to do so. That was a tactic for advantage. That was a tactic to make Bernie Smith miss. He got his way. Whether Bernie Smith heard it or not is absolutely irrelevant. The intent was there. The DRA have to do something, because let me tell you, if he gets away with that and it goes on again, if that was Phil Taylor doing that, Phil Taylor would be reported on the back page of every newspaper, the front page and in the middle spread. That was disgusting.
Pipe, naturally, played the victim, claimed it was all blown out of proportion, that neither the referee nor Smith had complained, but that didn't matter anymore. Once the footage made the rounds, the court of public opinion took over and Pipe was branded a cheat. The real punishment wasn't the fine, it was the reaction when he stepped up for his next match. Booed relentlessly, thrown off his rhythm, and forced to play as the villain. In a game where mental steel is everything, that kind of hostility is lethal. Did he deserve it? Some still argue it was nothing more than an unfortunate coincidence. Others see it as one of the pettiest yet most effective bits of gamesmanship in darts history. Either way, Pipe's name is now linked to one of the strangest scandals the sport has ever seen, and all it took was a cough. Phil Taylor didn't just dominate darts, he was darts. 16 world titles, countless records, and an aura of invincibility that made most opponents feel beaten before they even stepped up to the Oki. But even legends aren't immune to controversy, and in 2013, Taylor found himself at the centre of one that had nothing to do with his throwing arm, and everything to do with what was, or wasn't, on the scoreboard. It happened during the World Match Play quarterfinals, a high-stakes battle against Dean Winstanley. Taylor needed a double 12 to close out the match, and from a distance, it looked like he nailed it. The referee called it in. Winstanley didn't protest. Game over. But then came the slow-motion replay, and suddenly, it wasn't so clear. The dart had landed just outside the wire. At best, it was an honest mistake. Referees aren't infallible, and Winstanley, in the moment, had no reason to double-check. But at worst, it looked like Taylor knew and took the win anyway. And when a sport's most dominant player is caught in a moment of questionable ethics, fans don't forget.
Taylor is sat there on a potential 2-dart, although that is a nasty miss. He's still got to find himself a treble, which he has done. And Phil Taylor now looking at double 12.
And the flag, Phil Taylor. The flag, Phil.
It didn't look in at first, did it?
Really didn't. I have to say, I thought Russ had called that wrong, but it's just where we're sat in the camera angle.
The backlash was immediate. Social media exploded, and even Eric Bristow, Taylor's former mentor and a legend in his own right, wasn't shy about his thoughts. The player knows if it's not in and has to declare it. You don't want cheats. That's a Hall of Famer calling out his own protege. Taylor, never one to back down, offered a solution: replay the match. A nice gesture, except for one problem. That's not how darts works. The PDC shut it down instantly, and the win stood. Winstanley, to his credit, took the high road, choosing to move on rather than fuel the drama. Taylor walked away with another victory, but his reputation, that took a hit. In a sport built on precision and integrity, even the hint of wrongdoing is enough to cast a long shadow. For Taylor, a man used to being untouchable, this was a rare moment where the scoreboard said one thing, but the footage told another. Wesley Harms had plenty of ways to explain his 10-2 thrashing at the hands of Gary Anderson in the 2018 Grand Slam of Darts. Nerves, poor finishing, maybe just running into a former world champion in top form. Instead, he went with air quality. According to Harms, Anderson had sabotaged him with an unrelenting stench, strategically deployed throughout the match. Not metaphorically, literally. He claimed the suffocating odour wrecked his focus and, in his words, would take 2 nights to fully clear from his nose. As excuses go, this was groundbreaking. Anderson, stunned, didn't just deny it, he was offended at the mere suggestion. Yes, he admitted, there had been one unfortunate incident in the past, but this time, absolutely not. In fact, he insisted if anything smelled off, it wasn't coming from his direction. With no forensic evidence, no instant replay, and certainly no official PDC ruling on tactical flatulence, the case was closed before it even began. But the damage was done. Not to the match result, Harms lost that fair and square, but to darts history, which now had to forever acknowledge that this moment, against all odds, actually happened. It wasn't just a bad beat for Harms, it was the first and only time a darts controversy hinged on the possibility of an invisible, unsanctioned, and entirely unverifiable form of gamesmanship. And given how far some players will go for an edge, maybe it was only a matter of time. Match fixing in darts isn't just unethical, it's spectacularly stupid. The sport is built on patterns, precision, and probabilities. A player suddenly missing by just enough at just the right moment. It doesn't take a forensic analyst to notice when something's off. Yet, in 2017, Gilbert Uang thought he could slip through the cracks. Up against Kevin Sim in the PDC World Darts Championship, Uang didn't just lose, he collapsed in a way that made even casual viewers raise an eyebrow. A 7-year ban followed, and if that was meant to be a warning, plenty of players missed the memo. Kyle McKinstry, Wessel Nyman, and David Evans would all get caught in the same trap a few years later. McKinstry, in particular, made the classic mistake of getting too comfortable. He admitted to throwing one match but denied another, as if credibility is something you can negotiate after you've already confessed. It didn't work. He got 8 years. Nyman pleaded guilty and took 5, while Evans, who played along but wasn't the orchestrator, walked away with 2.5. And yet, even after those bans, match fixing didn't disappear. By 2023, another trio of players was caught rigging games in the Moda Super Series, with Indian qualifier Prash Jawar losing his PDC World Championship spot before he even got the chance to throw a single dart. Then, in 2024, Jack Main had his 4-0 victory flagged as suspicious, leading to a suspension that will keep him out of competition until at least the end of 2025. It's almost impressive, knowing the history, seeing careers get erased in real time, and still thinking, yeah, but I'll get away with it. The reality is, darts isn't like football or basketball, where you can hide behind teammates or bad luck. When you're at the oche, it's just you, your dart, and a million cameras waiting to catch the moment when bad form turns into something more deliberate. Cheating in darts usually follows a predictable script, subtle, calculated, and difficult to prove. But in 2020, a 17-year-old named Luke Littler found himself accused of something altogether different, being too good. Littler had already built a reputation as a rising star, but during the COVID lockdowns, his dominance in online tournaments became impossible to ignore. He wasn't just winning, he was obliterating opponents with an ease that made people suspicious. Was he using software to manipulate his scores, a hidden camera setup, a second player off screen? The theories multiplied as quickly as his victories. Online darts had its own quirks. Without the structure of a live venue, it relied on player integrity, an honor system that, as history shows, isn't always bulletproof. Littler, despite his undeniable talent, found himself at the center of a storm. He wasn't the first young prodigy accused of taking shortcuts, but the sheer volume of skepticism was unprecedented. Then, the lockdowns ended. Littler stepped into his first major senior event at the Irish Open in 2021 and won it. Instantly. No delay, no adjustment period. The same precision, the same ruthless efficiency. The doubters, so confident in their accusations, suddenly had to reconsider. This wasn't some unknown hiding behind a screen. This was a teenager dismantling veterans in person, under tournament conditions, with every throw scrutinized. The accusations vanished overnight, but the damage was already done. Littler hadn't just fought to prove himself on the oche, he'd had to prove that he even belonged there. The irony? If he had been cheating, he would have needed to adjust to the real thing. Instead, he played exactly the same way. The backlash had never been about evidence, just the uncomfortable reality that sometimes greatness looks unnatural until you see it up close. During a 2012 Premier League darts match in Nottingham, James Wade accused Adrian Lewis of something bizarre, shaking the floorboards to throw him off. It happened mid-match. Wade, struggling to find his rhythm, suddenly stopped, turned to Lewis, and claimed the playing surface was moving under his feet. He believed Lewis was intentionally shifting his weight to create subtle vibrations, disrupting his concentration. Lewis immediately dismissed the accusation, calling it an excuse for Wade's poor performance. The officials intervened, but there was no real way to prove or disprove the claim. The match continued with an awkward tension, and Wade, visibly rattled, never regained control.
There's no excuse for just almost slapping the darts now.
Well, he's clearly annoyed with himself. The way the darts are going in is...
What's this about?
Well, Adrian Lewis just showed us the problem. With the way the game's gone, James Wade is under pressure. He's moaning more now than he was at the start. And I just think it's such a sour grapes.
And he's suggesting that Bruce Bentley, Adrian's trying it now because he got away with it earlier.
Why would Adrian Lewis be trying mind games right now? Because he has the win in the palm of his hand. If there's any point in this match he doesn't need to play mind games, it's right now.
Lewis went on to win, but the controversy stuck. Some saw it as Wade reaching for an explanation in frustration. Others speculated that, intentional or not, the movement could have had an effect. Either way, it was a rare moment where a darts match nearly broke down over something as fundamental as the stability of the oche. That wouldn't be the last time Adrian Lewis found himself in controversy. In 2018, things escalated far beyond a verbal dispute, leading to his suspension from professional play. But before we get to that, let's move on to a scandal that didn't happen on stage, but just outside of it. A police officer, a Premier League darts event, and a cocaine bust. A Premier League darts event at Glasgow's Oval Hydro should have been just another night of high-stakes competition. Instead, it became the scene of an unexpected scandal, one involving law enforcement, drugs, and a frantic attempt to escape. A Police Scotland detective was caught trying to bring cocaine into the venue. Security staff, trained to spot suspicious behaviour, intercepted the officer before he could enter. What followed was a chaotic scene. Rather than face questioning, the officer bolted, attempting to flee the premises. He didn't get far. Security and local authorities quickly detained him, leading to an immediate investigation. The story broke soon after, drawing national attention, not just because of the drug possession, but because of who was involved. A serving detective. For the PDC, it was an unwelcome distraction. The organisation had no direct connection to the officer, but having a major tournament linked to a drug scandal wasn't exactly good PR. Fans and players reacted with a mix of shock and amusement. But while this scandal unfolded outside the venue, the next one took place at the very heart of the game. A young prodigy, once tipped as the future of darts, threw everything away in a match-fixing disaster that was unbelievable. Leighton Bennett was supposed to be a future sensation, a teenager who made headlines for beating world-class players before he was even old enough to buy a pint. By the time he turned 18, he had already been compared to Phil Taylor and Michael van Gerwen. But in 2024, his career took a turn nobody expected. An 8-year ban, match fixing, the kind of scandal that doesn't just derail a career, it destroys it. The investigation began quietly. The Darts Regulation Authority had been monitoring betting patterns, and something wasn't adding up. Multiple suspicious wagers had been placed on matches involving Bennett. Bets that predicted not just outcomes, but precise scoring scenarios that played out exactly as expected. At first, there was no hard evidence, just a string of unusual results. But when the investigation deepened, the DRA uncovered a pattern of deliberate underperformance. Bennett had fixed 4 matches, manipulating his scoring in ways that only someone at his level could get away with. When questioned, he failed to cooperate with the investigation, making his situation even worse. The DRA came down hard, an 8-year suspension, the longest match-fixing ban in darts history. For context, most sports hand out shorter bans for doping violations. This wasn't just about throwing a few legs, it was about integrity, trust, and the very foundation of professional competition. The reaction was swift. Fans were stunned, fellow players were furious. Even bookmakers who rely on the legitimacy of sports betting took notice. Some called the punishment excessive for an offence committed at such a young age. Others argued it was justified. Bennett knew what he was doing, and if he had gotten away with it, the damage to the sport could have been far worse. For Bennett, the ban was effectively a career death sentence. By the time it expires, he'll be 27. Maybe it's enough time for the world to forget, maybe it isn't. Sponsors disappeared overnight and tournament invites stopped. This wasn't just another controversy. It was one of the most significant betrayals of the sport in recent memory. But while Bennett's career ended in disgrace, another player's downfall had nothing to do with match fixing. Instead, it was a past crime, a violent act that led to prison time and overshadowed an otherwise respected career. Chris Mason was no ordinary darts player. A two-time World Championship semi-finalist with a natural flair for the game, he was a rising star in the late 90s and early 2000s. But in 2003, his career took a turn that had nothing to do with darts. Mason was sentenced to 2 years in prison for aggravated burglary, a crime that stunned the darts world. He and an accomplice had broken into a house, assaulted a man, and made off with stolen valuables. This wasn't a minor offense. It was violent, it was premeditated, and it put him behind bars just as he was reaching his prime as a player. But the story didn't end there. While serving his sentence, Mason attempted something straight out of a crime thriller, an escape attempt. Details of the plan remain scarce, but what's known is that he and another inmate made a failed bid for freedom. They didn't make it far. The attempt was quickly thwarted, and Mason's situation went from bad to worse.
So I've been in a few months by now, and I had a bit of a run-in with one of the officers in the jail. He just started monitoring my phone calls. So we got all times right. I'll be over there at 9. You come at 10. As long as we're back by, I only needed a minute. I said, as long as we're back by 9:30. I said, no one to know. We've gone, and everybody was doing it. Literally everybody was doing it. So I jumps in the motor, surrounded by police. Of course, then you're regarded as a prisoner that's trying to escape. So you get cat aid.
His reputation, already in tatters, now had another layer of disgrace. For most athletes, this would have been the end. A criminal record, a failed escape attempt, and a sport that had no reason to welcome him back. But Mason wasn't done. After serving his time, he returned to darts, determined to salvage what was left of his career. He clawed his way back into professional tournaments, even winning a Players' Championship title in 2006. But the real turnaround came in the commentary booth. Mason rebranded himself as a respected darts analyst, known for his sharp insights and no-nonsense opinions. Still, no matter how much he rebuilt, his past was never fully erased. Fans remained divided. Some admired his resilience, others never let go of his criminal record. His story became one of the most controversial redemption arcs in darts history. But while Mason's scandal was rooted in personal choices, the next one unfolded in the heat of competition, an on-stage altercation that forced the PDC to take action against one of the sport's biggest names. Once again, Adrian Lewis found himself in the middle of a darts controversy. There was no roaring crowd, no deafening walk-on music, just two players, a quiet booth, and a match that should have been routine. But what happened between Adrian Lewis and Jose Justicia at the 2018 UK Open qualifier was anything but routine. The tension started early. Something about Justicia's behaviour had set Lewis off, though to this day, it's unclear exactly what. Maybe it was a slow play tactic. Maybe it was just an attitude that rubbed Lewis the wrong way. But whatever it was, Lewis made his feelings clear. From that point on, Justicia looked rattled. Every time he stepped up to throw, Lewis pointed at him, gestured aggressively, and kept the pressure on. It wasn't outright physical, but it was enough to break Justicia's focus completely. He hesitated before throwing, unable to ignore Lewis standing nearby. The match should have been about darts, but it had turned into a psychological battle, and Justicia was losing. Lewis, on the other hand, thrived in the chaos. He closed out the match with a win, but instead of a handshake and a walk-off, the hostility escalated. Lewis got in Justicia's face, jabbing his finger at him, refusing to let it go. Security had to step in. In a tournament setting that was supposed to be calm and professional, officials now found themselves separating two players like it was a boxing weigh-in.
There it is, Adrian Lewis has somehow found a way to win it, and he is still not letting it go, and they're having to separate these two. Adrian Lewis has somehow won that match, but is marred by some pretty ugly scenes that we do not want to see. Adrian Lewis through to the semi-finals. A superb run from Jose Perales is brought...
The PDC acted fast. They immediately suspended Lewis pending an investigation. Days later, the verdict was in, a £3,000 fine and a 3-month suspended ban. It wasn't the harshest punishment, but it was a clear message. This kind of behaviour wouldn't be tolerated, no matter how big a name you were. For Lewis, it was another stain on a career that had already seen its fair share of controversy. A two-time world champion shouldn't have been making headlines for incidents like this, but from that moment on, his reputation shifted. He was no longer just a brilliant player, he was unpredictable, aggressive, and dangerously close to derailing his own legacy. But while Lewis's fine was severe, it was nothing compared to the largest financial penalty ever handed out in darts history. That belonged to Gerwyn Price, a player whose celebrations and antics cost him over £20,000. Gerwyn Price has never been the quiet type. At the 2018 Grand Slam of Darts final against Gary Anderson, he pushed things too far, and it cost him £21,000, the biggest fine in darts history. The match itself was explosive. Price, an ex-rugby player turned darts pro, was up against Anderson, a two-time world champion and one of the sport's most respected figures. From the start, Price made it clear he wasn't just there to win, he was there to get in Anderson's head. Every big shot was met with a roaring celebration, not just a fist pump or a yell, but a full-blown, chest-thumping display of energy. And it wasn't just about pumping himself up, it was directed at Anderson. After almost every leg, Price walked right past him, glaring, flexing and muttering. Anderson wasn't having it. The tension built throughout the match, boiling over when Price got too close after a winning dart. Anderson snapped, shoving Price away.
He's just a buckle.
Well, now he did overstep the mark, because he's got in Anderson's face there for mine. There was contact made and it was initiated by Price. I don't think there's too much doubt about that way. And he ignores the bear pit atmosphere to nail tops and lead by 2. Tops he wants to become the first Welsh winner of a PDC major in one of the most contentious and controversial finals you could ever wish to see.
Price won the match, securing his first major title, but the fallout came fast. The Darts Regulation Authority reviewed the incident and ruled that Price had crossed the line into gamesmanship. His behaviour wasn't just celebratory, it was calculated intimidation. The punishment? £12,000 for bringing the sport into disrepute, £8,000 for his behaviour in an earlier match against Simon Whitlock, £1,500 for social media comments after the event, a total of £21,500 in fines, a record in darts. Behind the scenes, it was a moment of reckoning. He appealed, and while the fine was eventually reduced slightly, the message was clear. He could be the villain, but there were limits. Ironically, the controversy made him even more famous. He leaned into the bad guy persona, embracing the boos from the crowd and using them as fuel. And it worked. He went on to become world #1. But while Price's antics cost him money, they didn't derail his career. Others haven't been so lucky. Some players never recovered from their scandals, left wondering what could have been. From accusations of cheating to criminal convictions, darts has seen its fair share of shocking moments, and these were just a few of them. Click here to see moments when darts players were caught cheating,